Well, welcome everyone to today's TechGenix webinar. This is another in a series of regular informational webinars hosted by TechGenix, designed to deliver helpful and timely information to the MSIT community. Today's event is sponsored by ManageEngine. ManageEngine delivers real-time IT management tools that empower IT teams to meet organizational needs for real-time services and support. Worldwide, established and emerging enterprises, including more than 60% of the Fortune 500, rely on ManageEngine products to ensure the optimal performance of their critical IT infrastructure, including networks, servers, applications, desktops, and more. I'm Roger, your moderator, and I'll be introducing our speaker in a moment. I do want to let you know that we are recording today's event. All participant lines are muted. If you need any assistance during the event, please use the questions feature on the side of the control panel to send a question, and I'll try to help. And we also encourage you to send any questions or comments using the same feature to make this as interactive as possible. Any questions that our speaker is not able to get to during the broadcast will be forwarded to them for their follow-up afterwards. Our speaker for today is Derek Melber. Derek is a technical evangelist for the Active Directory Solutions team at ManageEngine. As an Active Directory MVP, Derek is sought after for his knowledge, insight, and keen understanding of the Windows product line. Derek writes for, speaks to, and educates thousands of IT professionals all around the world every year. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Derek, to get us started.
Thank you so much, Roger. And I want to thank everyone for attending today. I know it's difficult to get away from work even for a little bit of time, so we really appreciate your time. And I really think we have a good topic today. Some of the information we'll be going over is a little bit of review, but certainly I think putting together a package with today's infrastructure problems with securing data and keeping data private is something that we really need to revisit. As I tour the world, I went to 20 countries this year, I still see some of the same things going on, and I think what we need to do is just kind of take a look at some of these things. So we're going to be looking at data today and how we can really secure the data and ensure that that data maintains secure. Kind of as an addition to what Roger went over, I wanted to cover a couple more things about me. I am an MVP in Active Directory right now. I've been an MVP, I think 16 times over the last, 17 years or so, and both in Active Directory and group policy. And certainly it gives me an advantage and also gives you an advantage, because if you have any questions around Active Directory, security, group policy, anything around those areas, I have a direct tie into Microsoft, as well as a very good relationship with many other MVPs. So if it's something that I don't know, certainly we can find the answer for you. So please take advantage of that. There is my email address, and please take full advantage of having me as someone you can rely on to get answers. As I said, we don't have a lot of time together today, so what I want to do is I want to cover a couple of other resources that you certainly can take advantage of after the webinar today. They're all very easy to access, they're absolutely free, and really they're built for you. They're built for the community around Active Directory. So if you just go to our main landing page, ManageEngine.com, and hover over support, you'll see that we have some blogs, and these blogs are written every single week. If you come up here and you just want to search, let's say, for Active Directory, you can just search in here for Active Directory and you go directly to blogs that we write on Active Directory. I noticed that we've been writing multiple blogs a week, which is fantastic, and you just see that it's very short, a 3-minute read, a 2-minute read. The goal is to be less than 5 minutes of your time, so you can get bits and pieces of information that potentially could help save you on different things. Also, I want to point you to another resource on our webpage, which this one, if you go back to our main landing page and hover over products, you'll see security hardening for Active Directory. This is a page that we built a couple of years ago, and really it was in response to some technology that Microsoft released called JIT and GIA. You'll see those right here. Actually, we have a link to a video that I think is very important for you to watch. It talks about Microsoft's technology to secure Active Directory. We kind of felt that many organizations wouldn't implement the technology, so what we did is we built the bottom of this page, which is a guide to helping you with blogs and videos on how to secure all these areas around Active Directory. So this page is really about 15 years of my experience working with Active Directory administrators, security professionals, and auditors to put together this for you. A final resource I want to point to you is our dummies book. We wrote a Securing Privileged Access and Active Directory dummies book. It's a kind of a fun little read, but is great information for administrators, security professionals, and also for just anyone that maybe isn't completely in tune with why privileged access is important to secure. So you can download your own free copy of the ebook here. It's spread throughout our website, so it don't have to be on this page by any means. So those are some different resources that I wanted to point out to you that you can take advantage of after the webinar. I also want to talk briefly about our world tour. Our world tour for 2017 is over. I think we went to, over 20 countries. Personally, I went to around 20 this year. Last year, I went to 25. So we reduced the amount of countries this year just a little bit. But these World Tour seminars, as they are really targeted towards helping administrators and organizations better secure and become more efficient with regard to Active Directory. So we're currently working on our 2018 content and our schedule. I know that we'll be hitting many different European countries in early 2018. Of course, the reason we're hitting European countries, for those of you that actually maybe work with the EU, is GDPR. GDPR is a very, very important compliance that we'll be dealing with, as well as some other topics in our 2018 seminar series around the world. So those are just some different things that I wanted to point you to and keep an eye out for. Without further ado, let's jump into our content. And what we're going to be talking about today, as we discussed a couple of times, is data and how to protect that data. I definitely have a view on security myself, as I have been on your side, an administrator for many years, as well as being on my side, which is really solving problems and trying to create solutions for organizations. So what I want to do is I want to walk you through some steps on exactly how to do this. And I want to give you some tips as we go along the way, maybe that can get your brain thinking about some different things that maybe you haven't thought of before. So first of all, I want to talk about is, what the heck are we protecting? Well, what we're protecting is data that really is related to your organization's well-being. And what I mean by that is anything that makes you money or anything that could cost you money if it's exposed is data that we want to protect. Now, of course, we want to protect all data, because if we're going to produce the data, it's something we want to protect. But in essence, we can't protect every piece of data because that just becomes overwhelming. So what we need to do at first, especially, is triage our data. So we need to make sure that we are picking the correct data that we want to look at, monitor, and alert on first. Once we get that under control, then we can move down the list and maybe get to the tier 2 data. But certainly intellectual property, anything related to our employees, HR information, finance, all right, our money information. We need to protect this data. Now, this data can be located in many different places on many different platforms, but usually the data that we're protecting is in basic files. It could be even just a Word file. But also we have data in our databases. But when we really look at it, a database is nothing more than a file itself. So this is the information that we are protecting. Now, what are we protecting? Well, we want to protect the access. But access really can be buried here. If someone just reads information, that could be detrimental to us because there's some information that we want to keep private. So depending on the data that we're looking at, we have to determine which access we're concerned about. So we really need to look at a variety of different aspects of our data. So this is kind of the foundation of what we're going to talk about today and why this is so important. Now, who are we protecting from? Well, we have both internal attacks and external attacks. We have to be concerned really of anyone that is accessing the data. So this, again, is going to create a foundation for how we need to secure the data and what we need to monitor. So when it comes to the overall picture, there's a lot of moving parts here. It isn't just the data itself, it's all of the pieces around the data, which is why we're going to talk about more than just the data itself. Now, what I want to do is I want to build for you kind of a structure on what we want to do with the data, and then we're going to work through step by step on how to secure that data. Now, first of all, we need to establish a structure for the storage of the data. Normally, we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket, but in this case, I'm going to suggest you do that. Because if you have 500 file servers and you have HR data shotgunned across many of those servers, it's much more difficult for you to maintain and secure that data than if you had all of your information in one location. It's also very difficult to know where all the data is if you have it shotgunned across many of your file servers. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have redundancy. What I'm saying is you need to have the data in one location so you know where it is, okay? Now, I personally feel, especially with some of the larger organizations, that if you have data across multiple servers, it becomes almost impossible to secure because of the volume of information that we're dealing with, because of the disparate places that we have the data. So what we want to do is we want to put the data in a central location. Now, I actually have with me a live production environment. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to look at some information that I have. Now you'll see here, and let's just call this a file server, that I have a corp data folder. Now, whether it's a folder, whether it's an individual server, all I'm saying is we need to organize the data. So you'll see here that I have some financial information, I have some GDPR information. So I have some information in here, and this is the information that we're going to focus on today. I know that you are going to be dealing with much more than just one folder, but this gives you an idea of the foundation of what we're going to be talking about. So we have our information stored in a particular place. So this way we know what we're dealing with, and you should be doing this with all of your data as you go through. Now, next what we want to do is we want to create the groups that are going to be accessing this data. I have found over the years that a couple of things kind of fall through the cracks when it comes to groups. First of all, we end up with group bloat. What I'm suggesting is almost adding to your group bloat, but I'm going to give you some tips on how to do some cleanup of this, okay? Now, some key considerations. First of all, it's never good to put user accounts on an access control list, the ACL, okay? Because this becomes nearly impossible for you to actually secure data. I often get the question, well, Derek, if I have one user that needs to access the data, should I create a group and put the user in the group? Absolutely, because you may actually have more than the one user at some point, okay? Groups should be created based on who and what. The who is in the group. Are they database administrators? Are they going to be modifying the information? What are they doing with the data? And then the what is, what are they going to do with the data? Are they going to have full control? Are they going to have read? Okay. Now, suggestions for groups. You're going to place your groups in organizational units in Active Directory for organizational purposes, also for delegation of administration. Now, let me jump in and show you what I've created here. So I'm going to jump over here to Active Directory users and computers, and I've created an OU called corp data. Now, you may call it intellectual property, whatever you want to call this, but one of the two reasons that you actually create an OU is for delegation of administration. Now, in this case, what I've done is I've created an OU, and then I've created a group. Now, I have a folder, you saw it earlier, called corp data, and I now have a group called CD corp data. That's the who, and then the what is full control. So I now have an organization within Active Directory that is helping me carve out access to data. Now, again, you are going to have more volume of information, so you're going to have to create your own structure. You may have a top level OU with sub OUs, but what is important here is we need to create a structure that is going to allow us to easily monitor access to that data. So this is why we're doing that. Now, could you actually utilize a different existing group for access to your data? Of course you could. However, now it becomes more difficult to actually monitor access to the data that you're wanting to monitor. If I have two bits of data, one that is just read information that most people can access, and then I have private information, but I have the same group accessing both, how do I monitor the access to the private data? It becomes much more difficult. Now, also, what I find is many organizations, many administrators, many, I guess, things that I read, they try to focus on the fact that you should just be monitoring the data. I'm going to prove that we shouldn't just monitor the data once we get moving here, okay? Which is why I am creating this structure in Active Directory, that I'm going to put my groups in a certain location so that I can delegate to them. Also, that I can go in and I can actually monitor the access to the groups, the modification to the groups, everything around these groups. So there is a method to my madness here. Now, when it comes to the delegation piece, you can do a couple of different things. One is you can use Microsoft delegation, which is this delegate control here. And one of the things that you can do, let me just add in a group here, is you can actually deal with the group membership right here. See that? So this is the delegation I'm talking about. Now, this delegation becomes very difficult to manage. So one of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do is actually get a tool that can help with this delegation of the concepts around Active Directory. The tool that I'm going to suggest is AD Manager Plus for this. AD Manager Plus has a full-blown delegation piece. And the delegation piece has these roles. And when you create a new role, you can actually go in and just deal with group management. And here you can actually take the complexity out of Active Directory and put it in a tool that has access. Now, I don't want to go into all the details around this, but the main reason I'm pointing to this is if I use delegation in Active Directory, first of all, it's very difficult to manage. It's almost impossible to report, and I really don't know at any one time who has access. But if I put delegation in a tool, now I can force every administrator to go through the tool, and the tool, whichever tool you choose, should have the ability to audit who is doing what. So you can see here that if I go through the tool, I have an audit trail, and I can look at who, based on the technicians, has what particular role. So using a tool becomes very important when it comes to this idea of creating groups and OUs, which again is why I'm going through this level of detail, okay? Now, at this point, we have our data located, we have our groups located. Now we have to put the group on the access control list. This becomes pretty easy, okay? Some things to consider. Again, because it is so important, users should never be placed on access control lists. In just a second, you're going to see exactly why I suggest this. All right? Now, consider everything when you are creating your ACLs and your group design. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you will notice that I am going to place a domain group on the access control list. Is that good or bad? It depends on your overall design, okay? Now, Microsoft back in the day had really nothing in Active Directory that was going to help you with putting groups on access control lists. So back in the day, we used local groups on the server. So there was a little acronym, UGLY, users go in global groups go in local groups, and then you permission the folders in the ACL with the local group. Okay? Users go into global go into local, and local go on the permission. Well, that really became very decentralized for administration because you had all these servers and all these local groups. So what Microsoft did is they designed domain local groups. Domain local groups moved the local groups up into Active Directory so that users go into global go into domain local, and domain local go on the access control list. I don't care what you do with your permissioning, just don't put users directly on access control lists, okay? Now, when you start thinking about the access control list configuration, you need to think about how you administer. You need to go through some questions, all right? Do you have a centralized kind of a core group of administrators that are controlling all of this access, or do you actually have file server administrators? The reason this is important is if you have file server administrators, well, you're going to want to have more groups so that you can distribute who is actually administering the access control list in those servers. Do you have a lot of administrators or only a few administrators? The more administrators, the more groups, and that's going to come down to that design. Do you have server administrators or domain administrators? That kind of goes to the first bullet that I was talking about. And consider what you want to monitor. Now, this is really the core of what we're talking about today. Obviously, this design, you guys have a lot of the design done. After this conversation, you may want to go back and revisit your design. But in the end, you must ask what you want to monitor. Are you worried about people being added to or removed from a group? Or are you worried about different groups being placed on the access control list? I think you need to be concerned about both. This is the core of our talk today, right here. We not only need to be worried about who's on the access control list, we need to monitor changes to the groups that are currently on the access control list. Now, do you see why we can't just focus on the data? We have to also worry about the groups that are listed on the access control list. And we must do both of these steps. Now, before we get into that piece, let's actually go and configure our access control list. So we go back. We're going to go now to our folder structure. Here is Corp Data. We go into our security configurations of Corp Data. And here you will see that I have a list of certain users and groups that are here. I did say users. Now, I did this on purpose to show you and prove to you why this is so bad. Now, notice that when I put a user on an access control list and then I delete that user, you end up with this right here. This is an orphaned SID. This user was deleted from Active Directory. Now, because when you actually look at an access control list, it's nothing but a list of SIDs, and this interface does the translation for you, the lookup, and displays the group or user, it doesn't know how to do it. So this is one of the reasons why we don't want to put users on access control lists. Now, the other reason is, what if Aaron moves from one job responsibility to another job responsibility? Are you honestly going to tell me that you're going to be able to go through every file and folder on every file server and find Aaron and remove him? No, there's no way you can do that. But if I put Aaron in the finance managers group, because Aaron is a finance manager, now in Active Directory, let's jump back to Active Directory, I can go to the finance managers and I can remove Aaron from finance managers. And I can go to Aaron and I can find out where Aaron is and which groups Aaron is part of. This becomes very easy. But going through the full list of files and folders on every file server, we're talking millions of entries. That would be impossible. So what we want to do is we go to the permissions security tab. We'll come back to that in just a second. And we want to add in our group to the list. So we add in our Corp Data full control to the list. Then we give it full control because that's what the FC stands for. Now we're set. Now, over the years, being an administrator, doing lots of training, doing solutions for organizations and administrators, I find that many organizations still use this sharing permissions right here. See this? I am going to convince all of you, you should not do this. Okay? Now, first of all, shares, when created, don't have the correct permissions required. This was a change that Microsoft made back in the Windows XP days, okay? Now, you will notice that when I create a new share, right? Let's just create a new share. Let's call it CD. You will notice that the permissions are read-only. Notice this right here, okay? I believe this was a big issue for Microsoft. They shouldn't have done this. Before Windows XP Service Pack 2, it used to be everyone full control. People complained, oh my gosh, that's too much access. Everyone, oh, that's everyone. But you should leave it as everyone full control. And notice what I have here for my Corp Data. My permissions, everyone full control. The reason I am okay with everyone full control is a couple of things. One, everyone no longer includes anonymous. Okay, I don't want to go into those details, but if you want to research that or email me, I can send you links to many articles I've written on that. Microsoft removed anonymous from everyone years ago. Secondly, when I look at the combination of security, the access control list permissions, and sharing, when you look at the two combined, it is most restrictive. So if I have everyone full control on my share permission and I only have certain groups of users here, who's going to get access? Well, it's not everyone. It's only who is on the access control list. So I leave everyone at full control. Also, if for some reason the share is deleted, what happens to the permissions? They're completely removed. These access control lists are actually part of the data. So since they're part of the data, they move along with the data as the content moves around. So those are many different reasons why we need to focus on this concept of security permissions when we talk about the access control list. All right, so we've gone through now organizing our data. We've created groups. We've put the groups on the access control list. Now we have to configure the tracking, the monitoring of the data. By default, you are tracking nothing in a Windows environment. Now, when I say nothing, I'm talking about data. Inside of Active Directory, Microsoft over the years keeps changing what is monitored by default, but we want to focus here on the data. Now, key considerations. You need to determine what you want to track. You cannot track everything. You're going to be overwhelmed with information. Okay? You only want to track what you have time to go through. Now, if you're military, if you're government, if you're some other organization which has mandates that you track everything, that's a totally different beast, okay? Now you have to come up with retention concepts, which you have to do with just data as well, but that's more forensics. That's more, I want to go back in time, okay? And that's important for compliance regulations. But here, I just want to make sure you know in real time what's going on, okay? Now, we don't want to track too much to overwhelm the server with just logging everything. Also, our logs are going to be a particular size. And most of our logs, if we actually go into the event viewer and look, most of our logs are going to be set up to overwrite events as needed, okay? Now, here's a tip. Microsoft, starting with Windows Server 2008, actually added this option to archive the log when it's full. Many of us administrators don't know this because it was never really advertised. This is certainly an option that you can have, but most of us today have overwrite events as needed, which means the log is a constantly moving, and so when the log fills up, it's just deleting the old information. So if you see that I go back in time, I don't go back that long ago, right? So my log is constantly moving through, and I haven't really used this machine in a couple of days. That's why I go back to the 18th. But as we go through, by the end of this demo, the log is going to be nothing but today's information, okay? So we must go in and set up auditing. How do we get information to show up in the security log? Well, we need to go into group policy, and we need to set up auditing. Now, let me show you a couple of things here with auditing. So our normal kind of legacy auditing is here under Windows settings, security settings, local policies, the audit policy. Now this audit policy is the original back to Windows 2000, and you will see that I have it set up here. Now, this is important to set up what you need. I'm doing quite a bit of auditing because I'm tracking a lot of information. If you are only tracking data, that's going to be object access. If you're tracking data and group modifications, well, now you need to look at account management, directory service access, and object access. If you want to know exactly what you should set up at a minimum, I'm going to ask that you email me and request that I send you the audit document. The audit document is fully detailed bit by bit on what you want to audit and what you need to set up completely, okay? So I can help you. It's in the document. There's too many permutations to go through here, but I can send it to you, and now you have that secret decoder ring on what you need to look at. But I'm not going to suggest that you set up the audit policy. I'm going to suggest you set up advanced auditing. Now, advanced auditing has some caveats. One of the caveats is you have to have a particular operating system level. Most of you have this, right? It's Windows Server 2008 R2 or greater. Most of you have your domain controllers and your file servers above that, okay? Here, the reason I want you to do this is when I go through and I looked at object access, notice I don't have everything configured. So you're reducing what is actually going to be tracked, opening up more capabilities for you to track what you want to track. It's going to be less overhead on your servers, less information in your security logs. So overall, this is a much better thing. Plus, your advanced auditing gives you much deeper levels of information versus the audit policy. Again, inside of the document that I was talking about, it describes both the audit policy and the advanced audit policy for you to know exactly what to set up. But you're not done, because not only do you need to set up the policy, you also need to go to the contents and set up auditing. Now, how do you do that? Well, you go back here to the properties, security, advanced, auditing. This is an important component. This tells the actual data that it's going to be tracked. If you don't do this, you're not going to track your data. So you have to set up the policy in Active Directory through group policy. Then you set up the auditing on the resource itself. Now, once you've done that, you're set and you're monitoring access. So every time that I go in and I do anything to corp data, I add content, I modify content, I delete content, I do anything, I'm tracking that information in the security log on the machine where the actual event occurred. So here you see a bunch of file system. Now we get to the final piece, which is monitoring, reporting, and alerting. So without some other tool, you get to use Microsoft technologies to do this. And you really can't rely on the event viewer or even PowerShell for this. Not at the level that I'm going to suggest that you monitor and alert. Because what I want you to do is for your important data, I want you to monitor and be able to run reports on any change to any access control list, any change to any group membership. And for critical, even the most critical data, I want you to receive an alert when that occurs. Can you do it with PowerShell? Yes. How long did it take you? A long time. So what you need to do is come up with a solution that can actually sift through this content in real time so that you can generate alerts. And over time, you want to know when things have changed. And over time, you want to be able to go to a report to see the groups and the changes to those groups. So you need a tool that can do a lot, and you're going to need a tool that can be customized, okay? And I want it to be easy for you. I know you can do things in scripts and tools, but I want it to be easy, okay? I also want you to be able to customize the alerts and what is actually going to be produced for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a couple of different tools for this, because one tool can't really do everything. It can, but it's more complex. So I want to give you the easy road. So what I want you to do is think about what you want to track. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk back through what we created. We created a folder structure, and in that folder structure, we put our content and we put groups on the access control list. And we want to monitor the groups and the access control list. Well, we're currently doing that. All that information is going through this log. But look how many entries. We have 115,000 entries. You're telling me that you're going to be able to go through this? I don't think you can. So what I'm going to suggest is you get a tool that is going to do this for you. Now, AD Audit Plus becomes the tool that can actually track groups, okay? Now, let me show you what I have created here. I have created a custom report for corp data groups. Now, let me show you how easy this is to create and customize. You will notice that if I have a group modification for anything that happens to the group, for this group, I'm going to report on that. But what if I want another group? Easy, watch this. So I go back to Active Directory, I go to my corp data. I'm going to create a new group called corp data read. So there's my new group. I want to add that to my report. So I come in here and I simply add in corp data read. Okay, pretty cool, huh? Now what I want to do is add that to the access control list. So I go to my access control list for corp data. I go to my permissions, not security, but my permissions, and I add in corp data read. And I give it read, right? Right there, read. Not read and execute, just read. Okay? Okay. But I wanted to track that. So I want to know if someone, if someone decides to come in and they want to modify the contents of corp data read. So they come in here to Active Directory and they add in, let's say, a new member. I want to track that. Well, how easy is that to track? Well, you just saw me create this, right? So now, look at that. I already have a report that Bart was added to corp. Did you see how fast I did that? I don't want you to struggle with this. I want you to have the ability to do this. But I don't only want you to look at a report. I want you to be alerted. I want you to be able to go in and have an alert set up. This is how easy this is. I can set the level. All I did is added in the group, and I can either email or have it show up in AD Audit Plus, the main page. Look right there. I already have an alert. Isn't that cool? I already have an alert. This is the power of monitoring and alerting. If someone comes to you and says, gosh, I want to know all of the changes that have occurred over time, not a problem. I come in here and then I can go to my corp data and I can view the alerts. I can configure all this information. I can actually see what's going on with this information, right? If I want to go look at a report, I can look at a report of all the changes that have occurred. I can do it over time of the last 30 days, the last 60 days, the last year. So now I'm getting the monitoring, I'm getting the reporting, and most importantly, in my opinion, I am getting the alerting directly into your inbox. But this is only the configuration for the group modification. What if I also want to look at the access control list, which is what most people want to do? Not a problem. I can go in here to File Audit Plus. And in File Audit Plus, what I can do is I can add in the critical folders, which is why I have it in one folder now. Notice how it's all coming around. So I go in and say, I want corp data. You'll see that right here. I've already added it in. So that means I've been tracking this. So now I can go and I can look at permission changes, and I can see all the permission changes. They're all right here. I can go and I can look at when things are modified. So if someone decides to go in to the data and they decide to go in and, let's say, delete a folder, or they decide to go in and create new content, all that information is being tracked. So right here, I can go in and I can look at, see how quick that shows up? I can see when things are changing here, right? I know when things are done. This is the important piece of a tool for monitoring. And of course, my alerts are right here. It's the exact same thing. I can also go back and I can look at a summary of everything that's happening. I can see when things are changing. So now I can quickly do this. I can generate these reports. But the important thing to consider is you shouldn't only look at the ACL. You should also look at groups. But what if your ACL is on a non-Windows machine? Okay. Well, this is why I have 3 tools listed. You need to have solutions that are going to be easy for everything that you have. I think I proved the AD Audit Plus and File Audit Plus are extremely easy. But if you need to move into Unix file servers or maybe just devices, that's when you get into Event Log Analyzer. Event Log Analyzer supports over 550 devices out of the box. It's the exact same process that I just showed you, but now you're going to have to go into a bigger tool to do it. And because it's 550 devices, you're going to have to do more customization than what I just showed you in the easy step-by-step. It's bigger. It's more complex. So what I'm saying is where you can use a tool where it's easy, use the easy tool. Where you need a tool that's a little bit bigger and more robust, you're going to have to get into a tool like Event Log Analyzer that can do more, but you're going to have to spend more time in customizing that tool. But in the end, you need to have an array of tools that allow you to easily generate alerts that can do reporting, and along the way is monitoring your information. This is the core of what I wanted to discuss today. So in the short time that we've had together today, we've gone through step by step how to organize the information, the access to the information, giving you tips to make sure you're doing it correctly so that over time it's easy for you to maintain that security. And with the structure we created, it's extremely easy to track when things change using the tools that we were talking about. So Roger, I'm sure that we've queued up some questions as we're going through this. Do we have any questions from the audience?
We do, Derek, and we'll jump right into those. First one is, why does ManageEngine have 3 separate tools for file log monitoring and tracking?
So I get that question a lot, and even though I just reviewed it, I'm sure that that question was asked before I went over the 3, but let me discuss that again briefly. Our philosophy at ManageEngine really is breadth of a tool and ease of the tool. If you can actually get a tool like AD Audit Plus that allows for such easy, quick configuration, like I just showed you, even though it doesn't cover 100% of what you need, a tool like this is invaluable to you because it's so quick and easy and it's powerful. But sometimes you need to go to other tools like a file piece to do the file auditing. Now, some of you are saying, well, wait a minute, Derek, I have AD Audit Plus, and AD Audit Plus has a file audit piece. Yes, it does. But what we feel is we need to give you solutions that span the breadth of what you're going to need. Also, when you start looking at Event Log Analyzer gives you that extra piece for the breadth of what you may need to look at. So that's why we have different tools, is to give you component-based solutions, but in the end, it covers all the different components.
Very good. The next question we have is, I receive too many alerts with my current file monitoring. Do you have any suggestions to reduce them?
Yes, and this is part of the overall design that I was talking about. When you go into your tool, you need to first of all make sure that you are only gathering information about the most critical pieces of data. So first of all, my recommendation is go to what you're actually tracking and maybe only look at what is most important to you. You can't look at everything. Second of all, go to your alerts, and inside of your alerts, make sure that you are configuring the different levels of your alerts. So if I go and look here, you will see that it's color-coded. The color coding helps me because now I'm not going to look at yellow nearly as much as red. Okay, so what I would do is go back into your tools, reduce what you're actually tracking to only pinpoint the most critical, and also look at your alerts and only do alerts for the most important, and what is most important, have a level so that you can quickly see the color coding as those come through. If you go through those 3 pieces, I guarantee you can reduce the amount of alerts that you're getting, and the alerts that you want to get, it is a little more organized as it comes into your inbox.
Very good, and we have time for just one more question, and that one is, I have created PowerShell scripts to do a lot of the same thing you've shown. However, often I'm finding I am missing events on some servers. Any idea why that is the case?
Yeah, so this goes back to the concepts of really the limitation of the event viewer. The event viewer, as we go through, you will see it has a size here. This interface actually has a size limitation because it was kind of an older type interface. If you go through group policy, you can actually increase the size of that substantially. Now, Microsoft over the years had recommendations on how big they suggested that your event logs got. So if I come in here and I look at the event log and I go to the maximum security log, right? Microsoft here says that they're going to recommend 4 gigs and the practical limit is 300 meg. This is actually kind of an older interface, but it still says it here, right? So you kind of have to play around with this a little bit. You have to know your servers. You have to know what your server's capabilities are, but you can certainly increase the size of your logs. But in the end, your log can only get so big. So what you're finding is potentially you have so much information that you're tracking on your server, your log is filling up. And when your log fills up too fast, PowerShell can't get to the information before it's purged out of the log. So that's why most likely you're missing information. You could also be missing information because you didn't code inside of PowerShell all of the events that you need to track. So what I would recommend is if you still are just bound and determined to use PowerShell, you go through and you come up with a way to actually look at the archived logs, which that's going to be a lot more PowerShell coding. But when you can set up your security log to archive, now who cares if it archives? You can go into the archives, right? I showed you that earlier. You can go into the archive to pull out information. That's going to be a lot more coding and a lot more trouble for you, but you can do that. You also want to make sure in your PowerShell scripts that you're getting every single event ID that you need to get. Okay, so those would be the 2 things that I recommend. If that doesn't work for you, send me an email and we'll go through some more suggestions to see if we can get PowerShell working for you.
Well, that's all the time we have. So, Derek, on behalf of TechGenix, I want to thank you for what is really a great roadmap for protecting corporate data. And with the state of security risk that exists today, it's hard to imagine any organization that doesn't have a serious need for the capabilities that you covered today. We also want to thank ManageEngine for making it possible for us to bring everyone today's event. Please watch your emails for upcoming TechGenix informational webinars. That will conclude today's webinar. Thank you all for attending, and you may now disconnect.